Every year, around £52 billion is stolen from the UK's public purse. But up and down Britain, an army of fraud fighters is battling to win it back.
They were stealing from the taxpayer and robbing the public purse.
We saw a man who was living a lavish lifestyle.
The money could have been used for extra doctors, extra nurses.
From paying for the police and our health service, filling in potholes and emptying our dustbins, to making sure everyone has a roof over their head.
When I saw the scale of it, it shocked me.
That's money that could have been spent on public services.
The investigators' mission has never been more vital.
We defrauded the system of about £1 million over 18 years.
That if you treat animals like this, you'll be punished.
He fabricated everything, he just made everything up.
Police officers! They're completely despicable and they deserve to feel the full weight of the law.
It just makes me determined to catch them, and I usually do.
The Fraud Squad are on the case.
Today, the shocking case of a trusted GP manager who fiddled the books to pocket hundreds of thousands of pounds to fund her lavish spending.
The practice manager has effectively stolen valuable resources from the local community.
And with the country in the grips of the pandemic, one man actually uses it to his advantage to steal over £100,000 from the public purse.
He fabricated everything, he just made everything up. He exploited the system for his financial gain.
When the NHS loses money to fraud, we all feel the consequence. It takes taxpayers' money away from vital services and it puts it in the hands of criminals. Luckily, there's a dedicated team fighting back against these callous fraudsters.
41% of all crime committed in the UK is fraud-based. Any fraud committed against the NHS directly impacts on patient care and the resources needed to treat them. My view on anybody that defrauds the NHS is that they're completely despicable and they deserve to feel the full weight of the law.
Cheryl Hill works for the NHS Counter Fraud Service in Wales.
Part of my role is to investigate the person or company that's committed the fraud against the NHS in order to secure a prosecution or professional disciplinary action. But the most important thing for me is to get the defrauded monies back into the NHS to be used on patient care.
But sometimes that's easier said than done.
The biggest challenges within my role is obtaining enough evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Sometimes we have the circumstances where we know somebody's guilty of a fraud, but we can't get the evidence to prove it to the standard required.
So when a report comes in from a GP practice in South Wales, Cheryl and the team will leave no stone unturned.
The GP practice is a very busy practice, as are all the practices in that area. They mainly have 2 GP partners and then use locums as and when needed. There's a number of administrative staff there which support the practice manager in their day-to-day duties, but overall the practice manager has the significant role of running the day-to-day business of the practice.
But one day, a doctor working at the surgery sees something that rings alarm bells.
One of the GP partners had found a document on the photocopier which listed all the staff and their payroll for that particular month. On examining the document, the partner noticed that there was the name of a previous locum that had worked at the practice but hadn't been there for some time. And at that time, the salary next to the locum was about £9,000. So this immediately raised his suspicions, and he then went to raise it with the practice manager. The practice manager has sole responsibility for the day-to-day running of the practice. So that includes the payroll, employing staff, managing staff, dealing with the finances. So they would be the obvious person for the GP partner to approach. On discussing it with the practice manager, he was told that it must have been an error and it would be rectified.
She also told him there'd been some HMRC mistakes with the paperwork.
She would look into it and let them know what the outcome was. A few days later, the practice manager then went back to the partner and reiterated the fact that it was a HMRC error, but at that stage, the partner became suspicious that all was not what it seemed and decided to approach the payroll provider to provide him with a number of printouts of all the payrolls for the previous months. So they were provided with this document, and on this document you can see that the beneficiary's name is PAYEIT, and you could see that against there's a payment of £4,400. And this continues throughout the period of 2017, 2018. This payment is being made. There's one there for £9,600. And then this changes into 2019, where the locum name appears, and then payment there for £3,500. And this continues monthly until March 2022.
Over a period of 5 years, payments have been made to a locum who no longer worked at the practice. With the GP's suspicions running high, he takes matters into his own hands.
So what he decided to do then was to actually speak to the locum doctor that the payments allegedly had been made to, who confirmed that it wasn't their bank account and they hadn't in fact received any of the payments which had been listed.
This raises more questions than answers and is now a serious problem.
The GP partner had grave concerns about these transactions, so sought advice from the British Medical Association, who advised him that the practice manager should be suspended because there was a suspicion of fraud.
The practice manager is suspended. It comes as a huge shock to the team. Could she really be stealing tens of thousands of pounds from her own employer?
She was regarded as one of the most experienced practice managers in the area and also provided advice and guidance to other GP practices. And as such, the GP partners put all their trust solely in her ability to perform the role.
And she insists she's done nothing wrong.
A few days later, the practice manager sent an email to the partners during which she expressed her dismay that they had tried to blame her for the error, and again saying that the error was down to HMRC.
Could she be telling the truth? Cheryl from the NHS Counter Fraud team is brought in to find out.
When times are tough, lots of people apply for government support to help keep themselves or their business afloat. But there are always some who'll take advantage. That's when the fraud squad steps in.
In Liverpool, Maksud Khan is one of a team that helps bring these unscrupulous fraudsters to justice.
I'm a senior Crown prosecutor for the Crown Prosecuting Service, and I'm working in the fraud department. The work is varied from benefit fraud to income tax to VAT fraud.
It's a job that demands meticulous attention to detail. Luckily, that's something Maksud thrives on.
The best bits of my job is actually going through the evidence, sifting through the evidence, making sure the law is applied correctly to the alleged offences.
But every so often, he gets a case that shocks even his experienced eye.
My first reaction was I couldn't believe the level of the fraud this individual committed.
It's 2020. The country is in the depths of a pandemic. Businesses are in trouble and people are on the brink of losing their jobs. The government step in with the furlough scheme to help employers and their staff.
During the shutdown, many employers had to close their businesses. So the furlough scheme was introduced to keep employees in their jobs.
One Liverpool hotelier is quick to put in his furlough claim to retain staff he didn't have any work for.
So what this individual did was submitted a claim for his hotel that he was running for 2 members of staff.
But when HMRC review his claims, something strikes them as odd. Just a month later, he's updated them, and this time he's claiming for 4 staff members, double the number on his original claim. Alarm bells start to ring.
He made the first claim for April for 2 employees, and in May he made the same claim, effectively duplicating his claim. This is where suspicions arose. At this point, they felt that something wasn't right, and this individual was probably submitting fraudulent claims.
HMRC freeze all his claims and take a closer look at the hotel and its owner. And the more they look, the more things don't add up.
Once the payments were blocked, HMRC looked at all the claims I submitted, not just for the furlough scheme.
Staggeringly, they discover the hotel owner isn't just claiming for the furlough scheme. He's claiming under the Eat Out to Help Out scheme too. This scheme meant restaurant owners could offer customers half-price food and drink on certain days of the week, with the government topping up the rest to help support the hospitality industry.
HMRC went through his bank accounts. They found out that he was making claims for diners.
Hundreds upon hundreds of diners. But strangely, every claim had later been amended and inflated.
For example, he submitted a claim for 1,308 diners. He claimed back £8,500. 2 weeks later, he amended that claim. He added on 300 more diners and he reclaimed £2,500 more,
bringing the total to £11,000. But while the inflated claims are a cause for concern, the biggest shock is yet to come.
Whilst they were investigating, they realised the hotel didn't have a licence to serve food.
The hotel has no food licence or even a working kitchen, and yet the owner is claiming money for a whopping 1,600 diners.
He didn't have a single diner passing through his hotel, and everything was fabricated.
It's already clear he's having his cake and eating it, when HMRC find another problem. He isn't just claiming government money for one hotel, but a second one too, one they can't find any physical trace of.
He was making claims for a hotel that didn't exist.
Back in 2016, he'd slightly changed the hotel's name and dissolved the original business. Now, he'd spotted a loophole.
The reason he was able to claim for the second hotel is because he had a pre-existing government ID, which he was able to log in and reactivate and submit the claims.
Not only is he putting fake claims into both the furlough and the Eat Out to Help Out schemes, he's doubling them by claiming for a second hotel that doesn't even exist.
The spreadsheet shows the claims that was made for the second hotel for the Eat Out to Help Out scheme.
In August 2020, he claimed for nearly 500 diners, but just a month later, he'd upped that claim to nearly 1,000.
And it's worth pointing out that every single diner is fabricated and it's all false.
Not a single claim is real. All are being paid for from the public purse. And the total figure he's falsely claimed keeps going up.
For the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, he fraudulently claimed for the second hotel up to £29,000. For the hotel he was running, he claimed up to £32,000.
And there's worse to come. Even the hotel that did exist wasn't open for most of the time he'd claimed for. Time to find out where all this taxpayers' cash is going.
But you have to make sure he was actually benefiting from the money. So they then obtained all his bank accounts.
And the checks reveal he's been pocketing it all for himself.
So every single penny of the E-Title Help Out claims and all the money from the furlough scheme, which was meant to be for his staff, all of it went to his bank accounts.
And it's a lot of money.
For the E-Title Help Out scheme, he claimed just over £61,000. And for the furlough scheme, just over £51,000.
HMRC have seen enough. He's brought in for questioning, where the evidence speaks for itself.
During the interview, he admitted that every claim he made under the E-Title Help Out scheme was fabricated and made up. He also admitted that he inflated the claims he made for the furlough scheme. He also admitted he claimed for full-time staff, whereas his staff was part-time. He made full admissions to his guilt.
It's at this point that Maqsood gets the call from the HMRC. They need him to go through all the evidence and build the case for court.
My first reaction was I couldn't believe the level of the fraud this individual committed. Said he fabricated everything, he just made everything up, which was quite shocking. This individual exploited the system and made claims for his financial gain.
And for Maqsood, this case is as clear as day.
When the file came to me, it was quite straightforward. Having said that, I still have to make sure the case was evidentially sound.
But it's not long before Maqsood gives the go-ahead.
I'll charge this individual for 31 offences for committing fraud, or 1 offence for transferring criminal property. At court, he pleaded guilty to 25 charges and he was sentenced to 40 months imprisonment.
And shockingly, it isn't the first time this hotelier has been charged with fraud. In 2015, he'd received a 15-month sentence for VAT fraud.
But the sentencing judge said that this individual was dishonest. He highlighted the fact that he had a previous conviction for dishonesty. I was quite pleased with the outcome for him to get 14 months imprisonment.
This repeat offender brazenly took advantage of a pandemic to steal money from the public purse and from people who genuinely needed it.
It's important to stop people duping the system. The money is there for people who are in need, whether they are disabled, whether they are unemployed. And when people dupe the taxpayer, it's just completely unacceptable.
Another serving of justice dished out by the fraud squad. Back in South Wales, a GP has raised the alert after finding some very odd payments coming out of the surgery's bank account.
The GP partner found the document on the photocopier, which included the name of a locum that hadn't worked there for a long while.
Digging deeper, he finds a series of payments made out to the same doctor, but they haven't received any of the money.
At that stage, then, they suspected that there was a fraud.
Suspicion is pointing towards the practice manager, and Cheryl from the NHS counter-fraud team is brought in to investigate.
As an investigator, I have to keep an open mind when we receive a referral of fraud. It may have been that the payment had been made in error consistently over a period of 5 years. So we have to bear that in mind.
Her first task is to do credit checks on the account the money's going into.
These checks then came back with the details of the practice manager that was employed by the practice. We then, using our powers under the Proceeds of Crime Act, were able to apply for a production order to a Crown Court and obtain copies of her bank statements for all her bank accounts.
And this reveals not only where the money has gone, but what it's being spent on.
It was quite obvious, looking at the practice manager's bank statements, that over £324,000 had been transferred into her account and that she'd been using that money on day-to-day expenses as well as luxury items. She was also moving the money between her different accounts. I believed she was doing that in order to disguise the money, because the money was being paid into a different account to what her salary was being paid into. So this showed the lengths that she had gone to hide the fraud from the practice.
And her bank account also reveals she's been siphoning money out of the GP practice for years.
We were able to establish that the fraud had taken place from August 2017 up until March 2022. When I realised the actual scale of the fraud and the position of trust the practice manager was in, I was quite shocked with the amount that she'd managed to defraud and the lengths that she'd gone to hide that from the practice managers.
She'd covered her tracks well, but one slip and the whole thing had begun to unravel.
It wasn't obvious on first glance that this fraud was occurring. It was only purely by chance, with the practice partner finding this document with the local name on, that it's been found. In my view, if the doctor hadn't have found the document, this fraud could have continued for many, many months.
With the financial trail now all too clear, Cheryl gets the police involved.
I was certain that we had enough evidence to get the practice manager arrested and to have her property searched. We needed to secure evidence that may be in the property, so evidence of how the money had been spent.
And when they raid the practice manager's house, what they find is on a scale none of them could have imagined.
There were boxes everywhere. The house was just full of packages and items that had been bought. There was a lot of stuff in the kitchen. The worktops were absolutely full of luxury items such as a Rolex watch, an Omega watch. In a number of the bedrooms, we found items such as a luxury handbag, which was just cast aside in a bag. I think we seized 44 pairs of designer sunglasses. There was literally stuff everywhere. It was quite obvious when we looked in the back garden that some of the money had been spent on a very, very nice summer house. It was quite obvious where the money had been spent. All these items were seized with a view that they could be potential assets further down the line that could be realised in order to pay some of the money back to the practice. And she was arrested and taken to the local police station to be interviewed.
But at the police station, the practice manager stays silent.
She provided no comment answers and from that point on failed to cooperate with the investigation.
It means Cheryl's job is about to get much more difficult.
Her lack of cooperation then meant that we had to speak to all the witnesses and obtain their evidence to say that in the instance of the locum, that they hadn't received any of the money, it wasn't their bank account. We also then had to go to the payroll provider to produce all the documentary evidence which showed that the payments were being made. And finally then we had to speak with the GP partners to get their evidence which stated that they hadn't given her permission to direct these funds into her own account.
But her painstaking work pays off, and she soon makes another alarming discovery.
Further analysis of the practice manager's bank account showed us that there was a lot of payday loan companies that she was in debt to. We also identified there was a number of loans. She'd also taken out a second mortgage on the property. So that indicated to me that she was under some sort of financial stress. This was a direct result of her spending habits. When you think that 1 month she received £13,000 of the fraudulent money in addition to her own £2,500, you know, £15,000 a month. Some people only earn that in 1 year. She had that in 1 month and had just spent it, from what I can assume from all the goods that were around her house. One thing our analysis did show us that initially the practice manager was paying herself £2,000 to £3,000 a month. As the fraud progressed, this increased to £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a month. By the end of the fraud, she was paying herself regularly £9,000, £10,000 a month. And I'm convinced that had she not been caught, this would have continued to increase due to her greed.
The manager stole around £324,000 from the practice, enough to pay for over 7,500 GP appointments. But shockingly, it didn't end there.
There was also substantial mismanagement of the financial dealings of the practice. It was only after she was suspended and this fraud came to light that the practice became aware of the other liabilities which were separate to the fraud that occurred due to her mismanagement. For example, there was a debt in excess of £100,000. They owed the local health board £50,000, all of which put further financial pressure onto the practice. In my view, not many GP practices would be able to cover a loss of in excess of £400,000.
And it's not just the practice that suffered at the hands of the manager.
By committing this fraud, the practice manager has effectively stolen valuable resources from the local community. The money could have been used for extra doctors, there could have been extra nurses, and better facilities for the patients at the practice. In committing this fraud, she's robbed the local community of these benefits.
Now Cheryl has the evidence. It's time to get the case ready to go before the courts.
I was very confident that we had enough evidence to secure a charge, and subsequently CPS then charged the practice manager with 1 count of fraud. She pleaded not guilty, which then meant that we would have to potentially prepare our witnesses for a trial at Crown Court. But thankfully, a few weeks later, at a second hearing, she pleaded guilty. And in March 2024, she was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for the fraud offence. When I heard that she'd been sentenced to 3 years imprisonment, I was really pleased. It accurately reflected the crime and the work that we'd put into the investigation. One of the things I found most shocking about this case was the practice manager's lack of remorse for her actions. She felt that she was untouchable and that she could continue the fraud without being found out. Really, this just went down to the individual's arrogance and the fact that she thought she would never get caught.
Cheryl now hopes the jail sentence will help deter others who might be tempted to steal from the NHS.
This result sends out a very clear message. You will be found out, you will be caught, and you will go to prison.
And the job doesn't end here for the fraud squad. While the practice manager does her time, they're working hard behind the scenes to claw back the stolen money.
We will look to confiscate any assets belonging to the practice manager and get them paid back to the practice, so then they can then use it for what it was initially intended, which is patient care. We will protect the NHS and we will do everything in our power to stop people ripping it off.
Join us next time when more criminals stealing our public money are taken on by the fraud squad.
Every year, around £52 billion is stolen from the UK's public purse. But up and down Britain, an army of fraud fighters is battling to win it back.
They were stealing from the taxpayer and robbing the public purse.
We saw a man who was living a lavish lifestyle.
The money could have been used for extra doctors, extra nurses.
From paying for the police and our health service, filling in potholes and emptying our dustbins, to making sure everyone has a roof over their head.
When I saw the scale of it, it shocked me.
That's money that could have been spent on public services.
The investigators' mission has never been more vital.
We defrauded the system of about £1 million over 18 years.
That if you treat animals like this, you'll be punished.
He fabricated everything. He just made everything up.
Police officers!
They're completely despicable and they deserve to feel the full weight of the law.
It just makes me determined to catch them, and I usually do.
The fraud squad are on the case.
Today, a criminal gang set up benefits factories to defraud UK taxpayers out of a whopping £50 million.
It was the biggest ever benefit fraud in English legal history.
And a Swansea shop owner selling illegal vapes risks public health and dodges £100,000 in tax.
It was someone putting money over people's safety, and that is something that we need to ensure doesn't happen.
credits are designed to help and support the most vulnerable people in our society. But sadly, fraudsters rip off the system to the tune of £2 billion every year. That's where the Fraud Squad steps in.
Fraud against the DWP is a fraud against the community. It's taking money from vulnerable people and putting it into the hands of criminal gangs in the underground.
Ben Reid is a specialist prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service.
My work involves essentially bringing criminals to justice, so I specialise in gangs that are committing fraud, usually against the public purse.
It's 2019 when fraud investigators in the Department for Work and Pensions, or DWP, start noticing suspicious patterns in some of their claim referrals.
Those patterns were claim data that was repeating across multiple claims, so addresses, mobile phone numbers, bank accounts.
The claims are all for universal credit, a benefit set up to help people on low incomes, the unemployed, or those unable to work.
As the DWP looked at the claim data, it quickly became obvious that this was an enormous fraud against the benefit system. In fact, it was the biggest ever benefit fraud in English legal history.
The more they dig, the more staggering the sums of money become. And some of the patterns indicate they could be dealing with a highly organised gang.
An unusual pattern for this gang was that they would make a false claim and it would be rejected by the DWP for whatever reason. Maybe the evidence of income was not strong enough, or maybe the address hadn't passed security checks at the DWP. But this gang were persistent in that they would simply take that claim, add more false documentation to it and resubmit it to the DWP.
The gang are producing a variety of fake documents, including tenancy agreements, pay slips, and employment contracts.
The employment contracts were often for companies that existed on paper, but actually didn't exist in real life, what we call shell companies. Same would be said for the pay slips, and the tenancies would be for addresses where that person simply wasn't living.
And painstaking analysis of each claim reveals even more red flags.
When the DWP looked at the false documents, they noticed that they were structured in similar ways, the fonts were the same. It appeared that someone was using the same template to create multiple documents.
Convinced they're dealing with a highly organised gang of benefit fraudsters, the DWP put together a file and hand it over to Ben at the Crown Prosecution Service.
When this case first reached me, it was early stages, so you began with the data that the DWP held, so the claim data, those repeating patterns. Then the job for me was, what additional evidence do we need and where might we find it?
DWP investigators track the claims back to a number of addresses in North London, linked to 2 Bulgarian nationals, Galina Nikolova and Gunesh Ali.
My first wave of advice was, we need to arrest this gang, we need to search their home addresses and their business addresses, and we need to seize what evidence we find there.
And that's exactly what they do.
Police officers!
The investigation teams start by hitting a business linked to Nikolova.
Nikolova's business address, which was called Antonia Foods, the front of that address was a convenience store. So if you were walking up the street, you would see a normal shop with fruit and veg at the front. You would walk in through the front door, there'd be a cash desk. You'd be able to buy drinks and freezer food from inside the shop. As you carried on walking to the back of the shop, then we would start to reach business rooms where we had computers on desks. That's where the gang would start processing universal credit claims.
A short distance away, another business run by Ali is also raided.
We found a mountain of evidence at Ali's business address. We found computers that were logged on to the universal credit system that were actually entering false claims on the day of arrest. And we found a spreadsheet being used by the gang where all these claims were being organised and marshalled together.
But that's not all.
A universal credit claim requires a mobile phone number so that the DWP can contact you and arrange appointments with you and that kind of thing. So the gang had acquired a pile of mobile phones and SIM cards for each claim that they submitted. That meant that they were in control of the communication from the DWP and they could respond with false data when required.
And that's not the only method the gang are using to avoid detection.
One of the things that the investigators found was a voice-changing microphone at Ali's business address. We think that was used for the gang to pretend to be a different gender. So if they needed to pretend to be a woman, they could use the voice-changing microphone to try and sound like a lady on the phone to the DWP.
The fraudsters' homes are also searched.
At Nikolova's home address, we found £750,000 in cash. Most of that was found neatly wrapped in a suitcase, but there was also a large pile hidden under a bed.
In total, 5 people are arrested. And investigators start piecing together how the gang is operating this multi-million-pound fraud.
This gang began with Ali and his business. Ali's business address was a service for Bulgarian nationals, set up to help them with their benefit claims. Common pattern would be to fly someone over from Bulgaria to London, bring them into their business address, take their basic details from them, and then create things like this is where they live. So we'd add a false tenancy to that. Then we'd create them a job, so we'd create a false employment contract and some false payment slips. And we'll add all these things into the claim, and then we'll submit it to the DWP and take the money that comes back.
In total, the gang made a whopping 6,000 false claims for universal credit. The vast majority on behalf of Bulgarians who had flown over with the sole purpose of committing fraud. This is fast becoming the biggest case they have ever worked on.
When I look at the evidence in this case, I see people who are willing to put their greed and their material satisfaction over the needs of the most vulnerable in our society. You know, people that may not have a roof over their head, they may not have enough money coming in to feed themselves and their families. This gang disregarded that and spent that money on designer jackets and trainers and Audi sports cars.
But even with all this evidence, in interview, the gang deny everything.
Many of them gave us explanations that they'd no knowledge of any fraud and they were simply offering a service to needy people in the community and that they'd done nothing wrong.
Investigators don't buy their tales and start the painstaking process of building a case against them.
As I was realizing the scale of this fraud, as a prosecutor, I was quite excited because my role is to take serious criminals and bring them to justice. So I could see I've got a really serious criminal gang here. At the same time, I've got anxiety and nervousness that this is going to be a really monster case. For example, there were nearly 1,000 digital devices seized from this gang, and they'd made 6,000 false claims to benefit. That's a lot of work, and to turn that into an understandable prosecution case was going to take a lot of time.
With a mountain of evidence to work through, the gang members are released under investigation. A decision that could prove costly.
Across the country, counterfeit goods cost UK businesses billions of pounds each year and are a huge hit to the public purse. Not only that, these goods can be dangerous, so the fraudsters need to be stopped.
On the case in Swansea is Rhys Harris, team leader of the Trading Standards Division.
A lot of what we would do, you'd see associated with what you'd expect the police to be doing. So scams, rogue traders, your counterfeit perfumes, or anything that's a product safety is all dealt with trading standards. So it's a really vital role that we get to do.
And as it stands, the sale of illegal vapes is one of the biggest challenges keeping them on their toes.
It's one of the biggest threats to trading standards that we are dealing with right across the country.
It's 2022, and Rhys and the team get a tip-off that illegal vapes are being sold in shops across Swansea.
We had lots of complaints from genuine retailers selling products that's allowed to be on the market about a whole variety of places in Swansea, and they wanted a fair playing field. If they weren't allowed to sell it, why should anybody else? But we'd also get complaints in from consumers because their children have been purchasing it there, or they were just aware that they shouldn't be able to get it. So we were getting lots of complaints about illegal vapes being sold.
Vapes are a major issue across the country, and as their popularity grows, the counterfeit business is taking advantage and encouraging criminality.
When you first go to put a vape or electronic cigarette on the market, you've got to register with the MHRA. That means you've got to give them a lot of technical documents to confirm that product is safe to go on the UK market.
The MHRA is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulation Agency. They work to ensure only legal vapes are sold in the UK.
So anything that contains nicotine is covered by these regulations, and it means it can only have a maximum of 2 ml of liquid or a 2 ml tank within it. Anything bigger than that means it is illegal.
Any vapes that hold more than 2 millilitres of liquid can result in the user consuming too much nicotine, which could lead to poisoning.
There is an industry standard which says that equates to about 600 to 800 puffs. So if you're seeing any vapes saying 10,000 puffs, 8,000, 4,000 puffs, straight away you know those are illegal vapes and shouldn't be in the UK.
So with reports of illegal vapes flooding the Swansea streets, Rhys and the team get to work.
We decided to look at all the shops in Swansea which were selling vapes. So I sent an officer around to all the vape shops to see if he could buy what I would call illegal vapes.
And there's one shop in particular that catches their attention.
It is a shop that we've had previous dealings with, and the owner is someone we've had previous dealings with in the past for other matters.
The shop is owned by Swansea man Kashif Iqbal.
Kashif Iqbal is in his early 40s. He's the sole owner of the business. And we've previously prosecuted him for the sale of unsafe goods, some counterfeit goods. And at that time, he was prosecuted and he had a custodial sentence.
It looks like Iqbal could be re-offending, so Rhys sends in a member of his team for a spot of shopping.
We sent an officer in, pretending to be a member of the public, just a customer. The shop had loads of legitimate vapes on the shelves. But when you went up to the counter, they were shown a list of all the different flavours for different illegal vapes. They selected which one, and then they would either get them out of one of the hidden compartments or one of the drawers under the counter, which couldn't be seen by any of the test purchasers. He was able to buy a vape which had 4,000 puffs in it, so straight away we knew it was an illegal vape. We purchased that, came away, and we collate that with all the other information we had before we decided where next to go with the operation.
With firm evidence of criminality, officers head back to the shop for a chat with the owner.
On entry to the shop, they explained to the owner why they were there and what they were looking for. And while looking around the shop, they then found a large quantity of these illegal vapes, which were all seized, and the owner was then told that he was going to be investigated about the sale of those illegal vapes.
Officers seize over 650 illegal vapes, worth around £6,500. After this discovery, the investigation ramps up. They set up another secret shopping mission, but this time with 2 underage shoppers.
The reason we undertake that is because we're aware that products which have an age-restricted limit do get into young people's hands, and that is something that we need to ensure doesn't happen.
The 2 young girls managed to buy the vapes without question. Evidence is building, but as more visits to the shop are carried out, Iqbal gets spooked and starts hiding his counterfeit goods.
So initially, they were quite openly on sale, and every time we went back then, there was a new form of concealment or hiding area. These 2 photos are the hidden compartment under the counter. So when you looked under the counter, there was a piece of wood, and when you looked at that piece of wood and you pulled it, it was on magnets, and when we pulled it, it revealed all the illegal vapes hidden behind the back of it. So this photo is of the storage room, and what you can see is quite a busy storage room. But when we started looking in there, there was a lot of genuine product that he was selling. But when we looked quite closely, we looked at the bottom shelf, and we were able to pull the bottom shelves up, and we could find the illegal vapes hidden under the bottom shelves, clearly put there to hide them from us so we wouldn't find them.
After 6 visits to the shop by officers and huge quantities of illegal vapes seized, Kashif Iqbal is charged.
He was put to court, and the court process started, and because of the quantity that we'd seized up until that point, it was kicked up to the Crown Court, and the Crown Court were waiting to hold a trial.
Iqbal is released on bail, and to Reese's surprise, he continues selling illegal vapes. But this time he's trying a different tactic to hide his goods.
He wasn't keeping much stock in the shop because he knew we'd find it, and he now had a storage container off-site which was full of illegal vapes. So the day following his court hearing, we went back to the premises and also went to the storage unit, and early that morning we found Kashif Iqbal in his van, pulling up at the storage unit, opening the storage unit. At that point, we drove over with some police officers, and I looked in the back of the van because the van was open, and I was amazed about how many vapes were just sitting in the back of the van. I then turned around and looked in the shipping container, and there was thousands of illegal vapes. We literally caught him red-handed with the vapes in the van and the vapes in the unit. I was really shocked, and I wasn't expecting quite as many as we found. There was over 15,000 vapes in big storage boxes. On top of that, there was over a further 4,000 of them found in the back of the van. So in total, just on the visit to that one premises, we had just under 20,000 illegal vapes.
Reese and the team estimate the value as between £200,000 and £230,000.
It was a great find for us, and it really helped us with our case, because at no point earlier in the investigation we dreamed that we'd find this quantity of vapes in Swansea. It was someone putting money over people's safety, because these products aren't allowed to be in the UK. They're not registered with the MHA, so they haven't had all the safety data put in. So he doesn't know what risk he's putting people at.
Iqbal needs to be stopped, so is rearrested and remanded in custody until his trial.
When he went to court, he was sentenced on the basis that it was £500,000 worth of detriment, half of which was money he'd made, and the other half was the value of the products he had in his possession. In respect of how much money he's made from his illegal crime, you know, buying illegal vapes and selling illegal vapes isn't something that will go through his books because you don't declare when you're making illegal earnings. So he would have, by avoiding tax on the basis of his 20% tax, there would have been £100,000 worth of tax avoided.
Iqbal is sentenced to 5.5 years behind bars.
When the result came through, we were very pleased that we'd been able to stop this, at least in this shop. It's a continual problem across a lot of other stores we've got in Swansea in relation to illegal sales. But we were really happy with the result because it showed the hard work put in by the officers had come to fruition. And it also sort of sends a message out there that if you are caught selling these types of products and you continue, you could also be sent to prison.
Back in London, the Crown Prosecution Service have been working with the Department for Work and Pensions, investigating one of the biggest benefit frauds in British legal history. 5 gang members believed to be behind the fraud have been arrested, but with a mountain of evidence to work through, investigators are forced to release them under caution, a decision they may live to regret.
Many of the gang members then took themselves to airports. They arrived with a large amount of luggage and their entire families, and it was obvious that they were trying to flee the country.
The investigation team turned to Ben for advice.
I said, well, we're going to have to remand these gang members into custody. We're going to have to arrest them now, and they're going to have to go into prison whilst we process this material and prepare their case.
Investigators need to act fast. If the gang members flee the country, they may never secure justice against them.
Nikolova applied to the Bulgarian authorities for a new Bulgarian passport, and she lied in that application. She said that she'd lost her old passport. That was not true. We'd seized it from her. So she was lying to the Bulgarian authorities, trying to get a passport to flee the country.
Nikolova is rearrested and remanded in custody. As for Ali, it appears they're too late.
Ali, unfortunately, did manage to leave the country. He returned to Bulgaria. That caused us a good deal of worry because we knew that Ali was a gang leader. We knew that he was responsible for literally millions of pounds being stolen from the benefit system.
It's a massive blow, just when they thought they'd snared the gang behind Britain's biggest benefit fraud. One of the main ringleaders slips the net.
When we found out that he'd managed to escape to Bulgaria, I think the truth is we were angry, we were concerned, and we were eager to talk to the Bulgarian authorities and see what could be done.
Ben and the team are determined to bring Ali back to the UK to face justice. So they applied to the Bulgarian authorities for an extradition order.
The process of extraditing Ali took a long time because everything had to be translated, all our applications had to be translated into Bulgarian, and the lower court in Bulgaria didn't agree with our application. They actually refused to extradite Ali back to the UK, so we had to appeal to the higher court in Bulgaria. I'm glad to say agreed and did send him back to the UK. I was overjoyed. I knew at that point that we were going to finally bring justice to Ali.
With Ali back on UK soil, he's rearrested and charged. And finally, all 5 fraudsters get their day in court.
Initially, all of the gang members pleaded not guilty, but after they'd had time to read and digest the evidence, they all changed their pleas to guilty. So there was no trial in this case, but we proceeded to sentence.
Galina Nikolova is sentenced to 8 years behind bars. Ganesh Ali received 7 years and 3 months. The remaining gang members got between 3 and 4 years each.
As a prosecutor, I'm very pleased that we secured justice in this case and that this gang all received prison sentences. When I look back on this case, I'm immensely proud of the work that my team did. I'm talking about the CPS team and the DWP team. This case really demanded an awful lot of work and determination over a long period of time. So I'm immensely proud of what they did, and I'm also very proud that we got the biggest benefit fraud sentence ever in English legal history.
But for Ben, the hard work doesn't end there.
This gang had stolen £54 million from the taxpayer, and we need to get that money back. And at the CPS, we have a specialist team of prosecutors who will give advice on confiscation. And they will now look at this gang and they'll look at what assets they've got. They'll restrain or freeze those assets, and they'll work out the best ways of liquidating all that money to get money back to the taxpayer. This gang simply thought they weren't going to get caught. They thought they'd found a way to fool everyone and no one would ever catch up with them. But we did.
Join us next time when more criminals stealing our public money are taken on by the Fraud Squad.
this heart has to fight again, so both had to suffer. Hello, now I know what to do when nostalgia always overflows. I wanna scream and let the whole world know that I'm in love. A love that goes against the road and against the sun. Night falls, I feel so lonely and empty. I listen to each of my own breaths. I heard every writhing pain, torn apart in painful nostalgia. What love is filling me. Forever, then this heart has to fight again, so both had to suffer.